Hello everyone, and welcome to Module 3, Communication Techniques. So in the previous modules, you have learned about how to establish a strategy, what are the purposes of communication, and how to identify and prioritize your stakeholders. Well, in this module, we'll bring all these things together and make you create an amazing communications campaign. So are you ready? Well, let's start our presentation. I will share my screen with you. All right, communication techniques. So, we all know about the power of communications, right? We start with an audience. Let's not call it customer. This is the profit view. And we want to create, through communication, we want to create a link with this customer or with this audience to increase loyalty. But to do that, we need to give them some value. Otherwise, why will the customer come to us and be loyal to us? Well, so we need to give value to our audience in order to establish a relationship with them. And only after that, we'll have success in our communications. But how can we do that? And we are using a lot of communication tools all the time. I'm sure that you in your park, in your Natura 2000 area, you are already using a lot of communication tools. The question is, are people really listening? How can you stand out if there are so many noise on social media, for example? And how can I unleash creativity on a budget? And lastly, where to invest my resources. So we all know that communication can be very, very demanding in terms of resources, but we also know that there are a lot of tricks and low-cost options that can make you boost the effectiveness of your communications and still keep it on a low budget. So we need to be smart and be able to prioritize and go exactly where our audiences are. But how does it start? Well, it starts with strategy. We start with a strategy and only then we'll go into action. So let's structure our communications. This is what we are going to do in the next couple of minutes. So let's define our outcomes or objectives. Let's understand who our audience is and where can we reach out to them. So we can then establish relationships, build relationships with our main audiences, and then draft messages for them that will be delivered through a certain channel. So this is a thinking process, and I would like you to keep this thinking process with you. So let's look at the outcomes or at the objectives. Well, in module 1, Carol already introduced you the principles of good communications and how to write good objectives, but you'll be looking at this later on. So my advice to you, and this is really a personal advice as the communications manager of the Europark Federation, the first thing I have done to create a communications plan of Europark was to identify the objectives of our organization. There was a strategy already implemented, and translate these objectives of our organization into communication objectives. Indeed, communication needs to be totally connected with the objectives of the organization, because in the end, communication is the most valuable tool you have to reach out your objectives. Either they are conservation objectives, engaging objectives, it doesn't matter. So that's my first tip to you. For example, these were the 4 objectives of the Europark: working for nature, helping people and organizations learn, promoting sustainability, and working together. Well, we then translated these 4 strategic elements into communication strategic objectives here. And because there is a difference in thinking strategically and thinking operationally, so we first made the connection between our objectives and the strategic objectives, what we really want to capture, with Working for Nature. So we want to promote the exchange between members, and we want to disseminate relevant information for protected areas. But if you are an expert already on creating smart objectives, you know that this is not very smart. It's just a help to translate it now to something more operational. And then we created several different operational objectives, measurable objectives for each one of the communication strategic objectives that we found. And then surely we looked at our audiences, as everyone would do. And we also did a grid similar to the one that you have learned in the past module to identify who are our priority stakeholders that we need to involve, or to consult, or to monitor, or to keep informed. But let's not go into detail. Let's just understand what are the main key points of each. So we've looked at outcomes. Now we look at audience. And in module 2, indeed, you have learned how to identify and prioritize by interest and engagement, or by influence and power. But in module 3, we will be adding a new layer of information. So we will need to understand from our priority targets some demographics, some values, some interests. Where do they look for information? Which information do they receive in which platform? How can I better reach out to them? So it's not only identifying and prioritizing, it's then adding a different layer of understanding. We need to know where they consume information so we can better reach out to them, just to be more effective. So we have looked at outcome and audience, right? Now that we have identified our stakeholders and we actually know more about them, we need to start building a relationship, right? This graphic, it's a graphic made by the European Communication Monitor 2019. And it really illustrates clearly what is the basis of communications, or the biggest challenge of communication nowadays is to build and maintain trust. Indeed, we are in a world so much surrounded by fake news and publicity that people find it very hard to be honest and transparent. Well, maybe this will be less of a concern for a nature conservation organization, either governmental or non-profit, but still, building and managing and maintaining trust seems to be one of the main challenges. And then certainly dealing with the speed of volume and information flow, and exploring new ways of creating and distributing your own content, because there are so many platforms and so many people in so many different places that we need to be very wise not to spread out too much and spare all our resources ineffectively. And then this is one that I like the most: matching the needs to address more audiences and channels with limited resources. Because we all have limited resources, so we need to be very smart in selecting our tools and channels. So how can we build trust? How can we build a relationship? So to build trust, we need a consistent and coherent brand. What does it mean? Means that if the colors of my park are blue and yellow, why are my rangers dressing red and green? So the brand should be coherent across the multi-channels that you have. Then we need to establish dialogues and not thinking about one too many or one without feedback. We need to establish dialogues with our audiences. And for that, surely we need to be creative, right? We need to be able to capture people's attention, to show them something good so that we got their moment of attention and we can establish a connection with them. Surely for protected areas, this is much easier than some product sales, because we do have amazing landscapes and amazing animals and amazing fauna and flora. So we can use those tools to be creative and capture people's mind and heart. And then, of course, trust is based on honesty. So do inspire honesty and keep a transparent approach to your communications. Right. So we have built relationships. Now we'll start looking at how to create messages to reach out to our audiences. So we need to connect, right? We need to connect people with the messages that we want them to learn. Having said this, in module 1, remember the purposes of communication: informative, effective, imaginative, persuasive, ritualistic. It doesn't mean that one audience can only have one of these types of information. In the end, they are all a mix match. But what is interesting to understand is that after you have identified your stakeholders and you have had this different layer of understanding their values, their expectations, where they look for information, then you can create specific messages that can better match their needs or their expectations. For example, a local NGO that works with frogs, for example, well, they really want to be close to your park. They want to be informed. But maybe you can even establish a kind of effective relation with them, because they indeed can come and support your park. So in module 3, we will have to match the purpose with the audience needs. So how can we match their expectations? And after we understand this, then we can focus on content. So our thinking process doesn't start, oh, I really, really, really need a brochure. No, it doesn't start like that. It starts like, okay, who are our audiences? How can we better reach out to them? And if we want to reach out to them, would a brochure work? And why would that work? And how can we make it that it really reaches out to the right people at the right time? So it needs to be interesting, engaging, but also to be placed in the places where people go. Right. So this is very important. Identifying the purpose and try to match it with the audience expectations. And only then we start delivering our tools through our different media channels. Okay, but let's think a minute. Well, probably your neighbor, your park neighbor who is 80, maybe he is not on social media, but you are investing a lot on social media and reaching out to many people on Facebook, and it's incredible, a big boost, but then your neighbor doesn't know about you. So we need to understand also that our audiences will have different ways of accessing to information, and we need to be smart enough to prepare how we are better reaching out to them. Which are the tools that we can use to better reach out to them? And just to give you a very brief example for this is statistics. And of course, it's also on the business perspective, but these are the different communication channels preferred to contact customer services worldwide. And maybe you have already faced this. I mean, in the past years, I have receiving many more questions on Messenger and not per email, for example. So someone over 55 years old will be more likely to just give you a call. This is what you see here. Whilst someone between 18 and 34, they will probably not give you a call straight away. They will first look for you on social media, write you something if they're really interested. And then if you don't answer, they might find your email address and contact you. So this is just for you to understand that people with different ages will have different ways of accessing information, and you need to be very aware of this. And then, finally, we reach out to our channels and tools. For Natura 2000 areas, I'll put this down here. Okay, so I have divided this in 5 key areas, let's say. We want to activate our brand, and this is where all our institutional communications fall. Means the website, our brochures, our flyers about our programs. So this is where everything falls, the institutional communication. Then we want to establish engagement, and social media channels and digital media are one of the best to start linking us with people, reaching out effortlessly to people. Then A big responsibility of parks and Natura 2000 sites is actually to share knowledge, scientific knowledge. We need to show people why it's important to protect the species that you protect. Why? What are their function on the ecosystem? So here we'll look at strategies to bring people close to nature and to give them opportunities to learn and to experience hands-on in your park. Of course, this is very close to environmental education. And here we can think about different types of programs with schools, with nursing homes, with whomever you might think that would benefit from your environmental education program. And then certainly there is a big chunk on visitor experience. So here they are. Brand activation, publications, brochures, uniforms and vehicles, they are also an important part of your image, merchandising and local products, and then certainly more towards the engagement side. Well, the website, social media and digital media, so videos, infographics, podcasts, and so on. And if we look at knowledge share, we have a lot of parks that are implementing volunteering programs. I mean, this can be everything from planting a tree to collecting garbage, or even a permanent volunteer staff member in your office. Why not? And we can also think about summer camps and especially citizen science. Certainly games will also play a role. There are many parks who do table games, but also different types of games. And certainly this falls more into the environmental education area. So in the environmental education, you can organize activities with schools, for instance. You can create your own junior rangers program, and we'll look at it later on. You can create public events. And then arriving to the visitor experience, well, there are parks that are working a lot on creating apps, either with information for trails or something more special like augmented reality. And all this increase the connection you have with your visitor and try to improve their visitor experience. Apart from that, you also need to take a close look to your interpretation panels and your signage in your park. And because we are people and tourists, many times they are guided either through a tour guide certified by you or by your park ranger. So we need to interrogate our park rangers. What are we saying? How are we saying? How are we engaging with people? And so on one of the modules later on, especially on interpretation, you'll learn a lot of tips on how to improve your interpretation structures. So we'll not take a deep look at this right now, but just for you to understand. So this is more or less the universe. Of course, now you ask me, what about journalists? What about media? Well, actually, journalists are more or less all over, because if you organize a volunteer activity or a public event, a demonstration of your products or a walk in the forest, well, all of these are chunks that are really, really, really eatable by journalists. So something that they can write about, something that sparks their interest. But we will look specifically at media relations once we are in our session on Wednesday morning. So it's for today, it's all. We will look in the next video. We will look at the delivering channels and tools one by one specifically, and I will give you some good examples of it. So take a look at the next video. But meanwhile, before you go, get a paper and pen and just try to answer, not extensively, but just to organize your thoughts. Does your organization have a communication strategy in place? Which communication channels are you using? So which ones are you in? Which ones are you not in? And maybe you should be. Are you establishing relationships with your stakeholders, or are you just sending out information? Is there this feedback component? And which communication skills do you have in your team? Maybe you have a member of your team who is a very good graphic designer and you don't even know, or an illustrator. So just ask people what they are interested about. Ask them what they can contribute with. Maybe there is one person who is like an expert in Twitter and is tweeting all the time with their friends. Maybe this could be a good person to take a lead on the Twitter page of your organization or your protected area. So just look inside first to your team, and maybe you have great communicators that you don't even know. And then, of course, do you monitor regularly your communications outreach? I mean, we make a post, okay, it's there. I never look at it again. No, that's not the way, because that's the beauty on communications, and especially the digital communications that give us metrics that we can analyze, follow, and then readapt our content strategy and relaunch different things. So for instance, every time I have a post on Facebook, let's make it simple, I always look at the statistics, how many people shared, how many people viewed it. And then I start taking these inputs into the new content that I'll be producing. What is the time that people are most likely to read our posts on Facebook? What type of content are they most prone to share or to react? So monitoring regularly, it's, I think, the key of success of any communication strategy. Because it's not, okay, I have a strategy, it's there. No, 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 no. It's about implementing, reviewing it all the time, and keep on trying out. That's the word, trying out. So before you go, take a look at these questions, analyze it in your head, and get ready. Because after the next video, you will be willing to try out a lot of tools. Okay, thank you for now. This is to be continued, and follow our next video. Thank you.